In this video, I'm going to address what seems to be a very silly question. Are priests human? And of course the answer is yes. But the reason why I thought it was worth examining this topic is because there seem to be two extremes which both get the question wrong for different reasons and in different ways. One extreme is to put the priest on a pedestal and see him as so far detached from our lives that we can't imagine any of our friends or family becoming priests, and seen as so exalted that there's this idea that priests are just saying mass and then doing nothing for the rest of the day. That has no bearing on reality at all. The other extreme is to empty out priesthood of its sacramentality. There's a beauty of the theology of the priesthood to see it is just a job or a role which is devoid of anything supernatural, and its beauty as to the offerer of sacrifice and the dispenser of the sacraments acting in the person of Christ. The priest also acts and has to act. The most authentic model of priesthood is to act in conjunction with one's bishop. That's the most ancient model of priesthood, which predates the religious model. So diocesan priesthood is the most ancient by far. To act in cooperation with one's bishop as the high priest of the flock of the local church. And the bishop, again, by the imparting of a character, a particular charism, a gift of the Holy Spirit at ordination, he, alongside the other bishops with the Pope, teaches, sanctifies and governs the people of God, which is why we cannot see as Catholics the bishop as the CEO of an organisation, as if he's just got a job, if he's just commissioned to a particular task. There is something sacramental about that. It's the presence of Christ. And although there seems to have been a movement in the 20th century based on the ideas of certain theologians to diminish the difference between the ministerial priesthood and the priesthood of all the baptized. Those are two different things, and the Second Vatican Council is very clear that the ministerial priesthood is fundamentally at the very level of being different from the priesthood of all the baptized. There's got to be a balance. Otherwise, in both ways, we're losing something of the reality of it. So, priesthood is a beautiful thing. It is why, for example, the priest sharing with the bishop the responsibility for leading the church, why that cannot properly be shared in its very nature with anybody else. Although the experience and the assistance, the collective knowledge of all of the baptized is very important to listen to, which is why we have parish advisory councils. They're not parish councils, parish advisory councils to advise the priest in his governance of the parish. In the 20th century, a lot of that became unbalanced and disjointed, and that fundamental sacramental role got damaged and harmed, and we see that occasionally. It's not Catholic. The priest is a human. He is struggling along with his own journey towards salvation and leading and sanctifying and teaching the people of God as well, which is why, of course, he spends so long in seminary. It's important for a priest not only to be aware of the theological issues and the pastoral application of that theology, of the teaching of the church in moral theology, it's Catholic social teaching, and all of those everyday applications of the church teachings in people's lives, such as the sacraments and marriage and all of that. The priest also needs to keep reading after ordination to expand and refresh his knowledge and to be able to apply and teach the people of God. One of the things that we cannot do is reduce our catechesis to the bare minimum and assume that the people of God are too uneducated or misinformed to understand the fullness of the faith. And that is one major role of the priesthood, to equip the laity in understanding their own faith and being able to apply that then in all sorts of different situations. We do really need to raise our game here and not assume that we need to put our catechesis at the very bare level of what we need to know to receive the sacrament. That is one thing I think going forward that we really do need to address. Catechesis, a real personal relationship with Christ, a sense of awareness of who we are as a church in our missionary activity. Because if we don't know the faith, we can't pass it on. Simple as that. So there's an important role of the priesthood. But apart from that, the reality of the priesthood is that we are human, we need time to relax, we have friends and family, and it's important for a priest to have friends outside the church. It gives a different perspective, an important perspective, to understand where people are coming from outside the church. And naturally you will do that. It's not something you would seek out. A priest should, and normally would, a normal person has a wide range of friends. So, and friends their own age as well as of different ages. And that's something that is important for a priest when he goes into seminary, not to lose the contact with the old friends from university, from work or whatever. Definitely, it's very, very important to keep in touch with all of those people and foster those relationships. Because naturally, that's what you do. As a human being, you need human relationships and true, genuine friendships, and not just people who see things exactly the same way as you do. So the reality is, and it's always a little bit interesting when people come across me in a different situation, i.e. not in the presbytery. There's a perception sometimes that we're either always in the office or waiting by the phone or always in the confessional or always in the church or just, as I say, celebrating Mass and then doing nothing for the rest of the day. The day is varied. There are no fixed hours for a priest. You'll be doing all sorts of different things. There's always something to do. Even on weeks when it's quieter, maybe there's not so many funerals or not so much going on in the hospital or whatever. There's always extra things then to work on, like a teacher would work on content in their spare time. There's lots of catechetical content that we can produce. Personally, I'm not a fan of just importing catechetical instruction, just buying a book as a product. The priest, I think it's important for him to deliver his own content as well, to reflect and complement what we've got as material. So that's why a priest needs to know his stuff. He needs to keep reading. And to be able to deliver that in a way that's accessible, and that's a key. But otherwise, a priest does normal things: cinema, sports, hobbies, whatever. As I say, though, and that needs to be really balanced against an opinion sometimes that priests are service providers, and that's something which doesn't tend to be an attitude with parishioners who know us well. That tends to be more of an approach of people who perhaps don't have much to do with the church except for the basic stepping stones, the points of receiving the sacraments of either themselves or their children, and that completely empties the priesthood out of its beauty. And it's sad, it's quite disheartening as a priest to have to deal with those situations. The people who don't have an understanding of discipleship at all, have an understanding of the church as belonging to some kind of association or a club that we go to when we need something, and otherwise we don't have any kind of contact with it. That is very sad. That's one of the most difficult aspects of priesthood in my experience, because that tends to be the more difficult to work with, because there isn't that relationship there. And there isn't that understanding of the priest as a human being. It's like going to a bank or going to a shop and then asking for a product and expecting exactly what you want, ordered to, custom made and what have you. And the church, the priesthood, isn't like that. We are sacramental, the presence of Christ in the community, despite our own flaws and despite our own weaknesses. By virtue of our very being, we are much more than just service providers. Not very often, but occasionally you'll get people, ringing up late at night or very early in the morning for something that can wait for a normal time, because they think you're just sitting next to the phone, and that you're not a human being, that you don't need to sleep, you don't need to relax. And the more I think that the gap between the reality and people's perception of the priesthood is decreased, the more that we have and develop a genuine culture of vocations in our families, in our parishes, in our schools, and the more that we become aware of what priesthood is truly like, I think that's conducive to just the openness to the normality of priesthood amongst us, not leaving it to somebody else, somebody else's son, somebody else's cousin, somebody else's friend, but not mine could be a priest. Nobody in my family, but somebody else. And when we get a situation where most of our priests are being imported and they are not coming from our parishes and not coming from our diocese, that is a demonstration that the local church is not in a healthy state. So we must keep praying for vocations, but putting real measures in place to foster a culture of vocations, to normalise the priesthood whilst keeping a healthy and correct sacramental understanding of the beauty and the reality of it, to make it an attractive proposition for men of different ages who are genuinely called, not to be afraid to approach the idea